Hey there, ladies and gents. I'm coming from a slightly different location. You're usually about that away, a few feet. But since we're going to be reviewing a short story out of an actual book, that is, of course, Stephen King's Night Shift, I'm going to be I'm going to be just in front of my bookshelf instead. We're going to be looking at books, so I'll be in front of the bookshelf. Maybe I'll even film this whole series here. Why not, you know? Sounds fun to me. Anyway, I'm actually drinking something a little bit more fancy, considering that we're looking over literature, guys, so we gotta be fancy. So this is tea. Tea is, of course, one of the great things you can drink while you are reading literature or producing literature. I did both today. But considering it's Stephen King and not quote-unquote great literature, this is still not incredibly fancy tea. It's just some peach tea that I brewed up. It is fancy, though, in that I have not sweetened it. So, instantly fancier. Plus, there's not a lot of it left. I've been drinking it while I've been reading and writing and stuff, so. But pretty good stuff. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started here. Stephen King is an author that just about everybody likes. Whether you're a reader, a writer, a moviegoer, pretty much anybody, you're at least familiar with him. However, if I'm to pick my favorite of his copious oeuvre, it may just be his 1978 anthology, Night Shift, containing original and previously published short stories. Some of them not great, but some of them true classics. And, considering my friends on Facebook decided this was the most interesting idea, kind of going off of that video that I just recently posted, I am going to be reviewing several of the most famous stories from this book, along with their probably even more famous film adaptations. The first I'll be reviewing is the neo-Marxist working man versus the boss man story, Graveyard Shift. I want to really quick read you one of what I think is the best parts of Graveyard Shift, which is Stephen King's description of this sub-basement. So we're going to go ahead and read a little bit of that here. I will credit, of course, the author in the comments. Not the comments, but the description, so that I do not get flagged, because this is not any form of plagiarism. I'm simply quoting so that I can critique. So let's go ahead and do that here. The bulbs couldn't banish the 12-year darkness. It could only push it back a little and cast a sickly yellow glow over the whole mess. The place looked like the shattered nave of a desecrated church, with its high ceiling and mammoth discarded machinery that they would never be able to move, its wet walls overgrown with patches of yellow moss, and the atonal choir that was the water from the hoses running in the half-clogged sewer network that eventually emptied into the river below the falls. And the rats, huge ones that made those on the third floor look like dwarfs. God knew what they were eating down there. They were continually overturning boards and bags to reveal huge nests of shredded newspaper, watching with atavistic loathing as the pups fled into the cracks and crannies, their eyes huge and blind with the continuous darkness. Interesting stuff here. That is, of course, from Graveyard Shift, by Stephen King in the collection Night Shift, originally published in the year of our Lord 1978. Now, this is an interesting story, structured in several chapters over a number of graveyard shifts at a mill. The short focuses on a young man named Hall, his co-workers, and his foreman, Warwick. The mill workers are asked to volunteer for a cleanup crew over the 4th of July weekend, working, you guessed it, the graveyard shift. A Lovecraftian buildup of horror ensues, featuring some truly monstrous rats. There's some interesting stuff going on here with the main character. A feckless drifter, unmarried, and similarly untied down to virtually anything, including his career, Hall somehow finds meaning in destroying his boss, possibly aided by some form of supernatural premonition. Some of the mill workers' decisions really don't make sense, but the symbolism is certainly there. Bereft of purpose, the worker seizes the means of production, a power hose, and destroys the former boss man unapologetically. In fact, he destroys the boss with the factory itself, or rather what the factory has really produced, giant mutant rats. The honesty of King here, however, is also commendable, seeing as the Marxist hero here ultimately brings about his own destruction through this rebellion, something being seen at the very time in the slow collapse of the Soviet Union. If you think I'm going a little deep in this review of a short story about giant killer rats, it's because this is the only thing I can think of to talk about here, meaning-wise. I mean, this is a short story produced in a closet while listening to hard rock music and later published in Cavalier magazine. In case you didn't know, Cavalier was a Playboy-style smut mag that also published a few short stories every now and then. So if you think about it, I'm really trying to dignify the story as much as I can. That's kind of a tough feat, however, because without looking at this as an honest neo-Marxist tract for self-destruction, there's not much else to it. The rats, which I'll call symbolic for the sins, avarice, sloth, and lack of commission of the mill workers and their foremen, are pretty creepy sons of guns. But if I'm being honest, they're not all that interesting till the concluding pages, when everything is suitably built up. Most of the characters here are loathsome fellas, and it's hard for me to sympathize with virtually anyone, especially considering their sadistic foreman is probably the best character in the whole story. The Lovecraftian vibes I get from this are ultimately kind of weak, but a suitable attempt nonetheless. Still, the story, at least in my reading, is entertaining, but includes non sequiturs, mostly flat characters, and a mediocre horror plot. However, I have to give props to King for his character descriptions and the very realistic dialogue presented throughout the short story. And like I said, that nice description of the scenery. He's always good with that as well. Overall, this isn't one of the standout short stories of the bunch, entertaining as it is. This is one where the movie adds a lot, and though I'm not sure the film is better per se, I do think it's a good companion piece. Out of 10, I rate this this story, about a 5. So 5 out of 10. Take it or leave it, but it's worth reading anyhow, especially on a rainy day like today, as it is in Kentucky. So, ladies and gents, that is my review of Stephen King's Graveyard Shift in his great collection, Night Shift. Not a great story, not a bad story either, kind of entertaining. Gonna sip the rest of this tea real quick. Tea burp. Which is actually rather pleasant tasting and smelling on the way out. So, peaches. So, ladies and gents, that was Graveyard Shift. I'm going to do a review of the movie eventually. It may or may not be today. I'm going away for the weekend, so this may have to sort of be what you've got for a while. But I also may be able to get to something today. So, rock on. If you like to subscribe, talk to you later, and look forward to the Graveyard Shift movie review coming soon. Bye-bye.